to Healthy Monday. My name is Aida Munzati. Remember, this is the Kirk TV Partnership Week. Please use the hashtags Tujenge Kirk TV. I partner with Kirk TV on all our social media pages. That is Kirk TV Kenya on Facebook and Kirk TV Kenya on YouTube as well. On Twitter, we are Kirk TV_Kenya. On Instagram, KirkTV.Kenya. As mentioned earlier, we will be looking at different health matters, or just discussing on different health matters in Kenya. And on this particular session, we are going to look at the burden of non-communicable diseases in Kenya. Feel free to send in your questions and comments using our SMS line. That is a 0111220044. Karibu sana. We are with experts on set, and they'll be happy and glad to answer all your questions. My name is Aida Munzati, and on the far right is Dr. Catherine Karekezi. Dr. Catherine Karekezi is the Executive Director, NCDAC. That is the Non-Communicable Diseases Alliance, Kenya. In the middle is Dr. Peter Mokaya. Dr. Peter Mokaya is a public health physician. Thank you so much for joining us, and we really look forward to the discussion and even understanding the non-communicable diseases further. I definitely together with my audience. So we can start with you, Dr. Karekezi. People hear of NCDs and maybe they don't know what exactly NCDs mean, what exactly it stands for. What exactly are NCDs?
Okay, thank you very much, Aida, and thank you for the invitation to join you on the show. I'm happy to be here, and just to maybe demystify what non-communicable diseases are, maybe just by way of introduction. As you said, Dr. Catherine Karekezi with the NCD Alliance of Kenya, Executive Director. But maybe just to give you a bit of my own background, I am a pharmacist by training with a PhD specialization in medicinal chemistry. I have previously worked in research and academia, and now I'm working at NCD Alliance of Kenya. Research was at Kenya Medical Research Institute. And then I've taught University of Nairobi, as well as Rhodes University in South Africa, and also USIU Africa. So, moving on to NCDs.
Now that you've done that,
yes.
let Dr. Mokaya introduce himself as well.
Yes, Peter Mokaya is my name. Oftentimes I have a challenge saying who I am and what I represent, but just let me try and do that in one sentence. A public health physician who has experience spanning over about 30 years. I went to school, since I'm addressing a Kenyan audience, I went to school at Lions High School, joined in Nairobi University, and thereafter worked with Cambridge, where Dr. Karekezi was also working, and then proceeded on to, after some clinical experience all over Kenya, I went to Johns Hopkins and did my master's in public health with a specialization in epidemiology and international health. I came back, worked with Cambridge, went into the civil church healthcare society for CHAC, running and managing health systems. And thereafter, I defected from that environment, went into consulting, and then later on went back to Harvard University School of Public Health again, and did further training in health systems management. And then I've been back and doing bits here and there, but I have a strong passion for wellness and lifestyle issues to do with not just treating diseases, but also seeing the holistic context within which diseases unfold. Yeah, because they say epidemiology is a study of disease distribution and determinants. It's disease is not a context of health alone; it's a context of environment, of how we live, how we eat, and how we express ourselves in relationship with the environment. So I'm glad to be here. I'm also a board member of the Non-Communicable Diseases Alliance of Kenya. I work together closely with Dr. So really glad to be here, and looking forward to having this discussion on the burden of non-communicable diseases. Thank you.
Okay, so Dr. Karekezi, you can just let us know of what exactly are non-communicable diseases.
So non-communicable diseases are actually diseases that are not transmittable. You cannot catch, simple word, you cannot catch it from someone else. So these are all conditions which are not infectious. So for example, HIV, TB, malaria, Those are all infectious conditions as well as other bacterial infections. Non-communicable diseases cannot be transmitted from one person to another. They tend to be lifelong conditions, and they tend to have deleterious effects on the individual that has this condition. By and large, most NCDs can be prevented by fairly simple mechanisms, but there are other NCDs which you cannot actually prevent. For example, type 1 diabetes, Down syndrome. So there are different factors which contribute to one developing a non-communicable disease, and I'm sure we'll get into that as we discuss.
True.
I don't know if you want me to talk about that now, but yeah.
Maybe Dr. Mokaya, you can just tell us from where you sit, yeah?
Yes.
What a non-communicable disease, just adding on what Dr. Karekezi has mentioned.
Yes, thank you, Ida. Really not much to add from what Dr. Karekezi has shared, but really to appreciate that this is, there is an interface between those diseases that are transmissible or that are infectious. The malarias, the HIV, like you shared, the TB, and now lately COVID-19. We are in 2022, but COVID-19 because it started in 2019. Those are conditions that are really either transmissible or infectious. In other words, they can be transmitted from one person to a person directly through contagion or from vectors, like in the case of malaria. Yeah, in the case of TB, again, and the case of malaria is through a vector, a mosquito. But for the non-communicable, is that they're not communicated through those avenues, like my colleague shared earlier on. And before, the days we were in med school some 25, 30 plus years ago, those non-communicable diseases, which we mentioned, the cancers, the blood pressure, the hypertensions, and so on, were not a key component of the disease burden. But over the last 20, 30 years, we've seen an exponential rise in those non-communicable diseases. The huge burden globally and within the context of Kenya.
Okay.
Yes.
Now, Dr. Karekezi, as Dr. Mokaya puts it, there is a rise on the cases of non-communicable diseases, and hence our discussion, the burden of non-communicable diseases in Kenya. Where are we as a country in terms of non-communicable diseases? In case you have numbers, which one is the leading non-communicable disease in Kenya?
Okay, thanks, Aida. Maybe just to add on to non-communicable diseases, as Dr. Mokaya was saying, I think we can also look at non-communicable diseases because you have the infectious diseases which have maybe a bacteria, a virus, or an infective agent which actually causes the disease. In case of NCDs, it's actually a defect in your body which is causing the disease or the condition. So that's why they are not transmittable, because there's no agent which is going to pass it from you to the next person. So for example, they could be genetic in the sense like Down syndrome, which is a defect in your own genetic makeup, or could be like in type 1 diabetes. Even though they don't exactly know what the cause is in type 1 diabetes, type 1 diabetes cannot be transmitted from one person to the other. It's actually a defect in the system. So we can look at NCDs in that regard. Now, in terms of the burden, as Dr. Mokaya has said, the burden is increasing. And as he rightly said, when I was in school, in university, we were just being taught in a kind of, non-communicable diseases. We used to think they're first world, they only occur in first world countries. But actually the burden of NCDs has been increasing in our countries and in sub-Saharan Africa, which is actually bearing the brunt of the increase in NCDs. NCDs account globally for about 71% of the deaths, but up to that, 80% of those are actually in low and middle income countries where we fall. In the case of Kenya, NCDs account for about 39% of the deaths which are recorded in Kenya, and these are statistics from 2019. In terms of the leading NCDs, we have cardiovascular diseases. These are diseases of the heart and the blood vessels. For example, hypertension contributes to cardiovascular disease. Things like heart failure, stroke, and so on. The second is cancer, and I think everyone will agree that cancer, the increase in cancer has been astronomical.
True.
I'm sure everybody has a family member, a friend who has recently, within the last few years, been diagnosed with cancer. The third is diabetes, and the fourth is chronic respiratory diseases. Those could be things like asthma and so on. The other one that we have, which is also a big burden, is mental health disorders. So those are, I think, the primary ones which have been identified globally as the primary non-communicable diseases. But also in our country, we do have other conditions which have maybe small burden, but high burden for the individual who is living with it. Things like sickle cell disease, which has previously been fairly neglected because it's really just found in basic parts of Africa and essentially not found in the first world, let's put it that way. Things like Down syndrome, which we've mentioned. Then we have Alzheimer's disease, which is increasing as the populations are aging. So we have other conditions which are actually increasing in number in our country also. Yeah, but the main one is cardiovascular disease, primarily driven by the increase in high blood pressure, which obviously leads to things like stroke, heart failure, heart attacks, and so on. Yeah.
Okay. So you've mentioned of the cardiovascular diseases, and Dr. Mukaya, I would like you to take us through maybe the causes. Dr. Karekezi has mentioned of the types as well. Maybe you can just take us through the causes, even as we look forward to now looking at the solutions.
Thank you, Aida. Yeah, taking it up from Dr. She has pretty eloquently covered the broad spectrum. But even before we discuss the causes of cardiovascular, the big four, and I'm glad that Dr. Karekezi has mentioned that there are others that are not necessarily amenable to what we call modifiable risk factors.
Okay.
This cuts across now, kind of mentioning what those causes or factors that contribute to these conditions. As we say, they don't have an effective cause. It's a metabolic, I don't know how to which one to use for metabolic dysfunction, but there is a defect in how the system, the balance that creates ease, is interfered with metabolically, or like you mentioned in some cases genetically. Yeah, cases of type 1 autoimmune conditions, cases of Down syndrome, cases of sickle cell are directly genetic diseases. Now, maybe just let me freeze there and say, why is it that most of these NCDs, the cardiovascular conditions, the cancers, why are they rising? Ideally, if, as though usually it's a familial genetic issue, then they should be at the same level at the scenario of sickle cell disease, which is genetic. They haven't risen exponentially.
Like these other ones.
Like these other ones. So this is, for the audience, this is extremely important to understand that up to 80% of the non-communicable diseases are amenable to modifiable risk factors that are within the control of you as an individual. That's why I'm looking at the camera so that the audience, this is extremely important. We can do something about these conditions to prevent their causation, because we actually cause them from our behavioral and social manifestations. How we relate between ourselves and the environment. What do I mean? How do you get cardiovascular conditions? You get cardiovascular conditions because you deviate from the environment that allows your body to operate in a balanced system. How? By the kind of food you eat or lack of food you eat, by creating stress, which in some conditions creates mental conditions, by not exercising or being physically active, moving around enough to allow your circulation, the system, to allow your heart to pump blood to all the components of your body, by not removing toxins from your body, by not sleeping enough, by not eating the right food. These are what WHO calls modifiable risk factors, which you don't need a doctor. You don't need Dr. Mokaya, you don't need Dr. Kanekezi to make them become. These are diseases mainly, unless they're genetic, that we cause ourselves. I'm answering the question of the causes. Because of how we behave, because of what we eat, yeah, and because of what we don't do. We sit too much, we don't exercise, we don't sleep enough, we stress, and we consume things or substances like alcohol, and we smoke. You know, those of course cuts across. So excessive consumption of alcohol or no consumption of alcohol at all, that's a controversial issue. No smoking for sure. Exercising, we sit on the cameras. The new generation now is what oftentimes referred to as couch potatoes. We are not allowing our body to spend or to operate within its optimum context. These are actually the causes of not only cardiovascular diseases, but cutting across for cancers, for diabetes, type 2 diabetes, which is diabetes that comes a little later in life. Now we know there's an interface between type 1 and type 2. And of course, for chest respiratory conditions that come from living in an environment that's highly polluted, the smoke and the particles, just other than smoke, that causes these conditions. So the good news here, good people, that we need to share, that we can prevent those causes by modifiable risk factors, by actually addressing, doing the opposite, by creating solutions, eating right, breathing right, drinking right, exercising, and basically allowing our body to operate in its optimum state. I think for now I'll pause there. This is a subject I'm very passionate with. True. And I allow my colleague to say something as well.
Dr. there's something you want to add in that regard?
In terms of the causes or the increase in burden? Yes, and I think also to add on to what Dr. Mokaya has said, there are risk factors. The issues of globalization, as we well know, the fact that now in Kenya we are connected to the rest of the world, whatever happens in wherever, we get to know it on your Twitter or whatever it is on social media. So the issue of globalization, also issues of industrialization, the changes in the social setup, and then also a key factor which has now been identified as a causative or contributing as a risk factor, significant risk factor, is air pollution and environmental toxins. So these are some of the factors, in addition to the tobacco use, alcohol, unhealthy diets, and what's the other one? Physical inactivity, which are risk factors for NCDs. And this we're talking about the specific NCDs, not the ones which are caused by genetic factors. These are the modifiable risk factors, which are generally within our control, at least to more or less limited extent. Obviously air pollution, that is something we really need to advocate about.
Okay. Just on you, Dr. since we'll be going for a break in a few, we'll be bringing in Josephine just to share her experience of living with type 1 diabetes. Just briefly, just let our audience know what exactly is type 1 diabetes, which, dear audience, is part of the non-communicable diseases. So just share with us, what is type 1 diabetes, how does it come about, even before we take a short break.
Okay, thank you, Ida. Maybe just to talk about diabetes generally. Diabetes is a condition where there's a high glucose or sugar levels in the blood. Obviously, glucose comes from the food that we eat, and the body is very well designed. You know, I think God took care of everything. There's a balance. So in order to balance the glucose, which is required for energy in our cells, there's insulin, which is a hormone, which regulates the sugar levels in the blood. It allows the sugar to move from the blood into the cells where it generates energy. In the case of diabetes, there's an imbalance, either because there's no insulin being produced, which is a case in type 1, or else the insulin which is being produced is not acting in the way that it should. It's like the body cells are no longer sensitive to this insulin. Or you could have a combination of the two. So there are different types of diabetes. There's the type 1 diabetes, where the body does not produce insulin at all. In this case, the individual who has type 1 diabetes has to inject insulin into their body. And without this insulin, they'll not be able to survive, okay? Insulin is a life-saving hormone because, as we will discuss later, if your sugar levels are too high, they're going to actually destroy essential organs in your body. In type 2 diabetes, this is the one where the body is not responding. Either the body is not producing enough insulin or the body is not responding to the insulin that is being produced. In this case, in this particular case, one either manages by diet modification, or else you have to take tablets, or in some instances you actually have to use insulin to control that diabetes. The other type of diabetes is gestational diabetes. This is diabetes which is first detected during pregnancy. So previously the lady would not have had diabetes, but in the course of their pregnancy the sugar levels go up, and this is gestational diabetes. Most cases it resolves after the delivery, after the baby is born, but the mother is at high risk of developing type 2 diabetes, and the infant or the baby is also at risk of developing type 2 diabetes later in life, also at risk of obesity and so on. Obviously gestational diabetes has its own complications, and it's something which has to be very well managed. So I think in type 1 diabetes, as we have said, the body is no longer producing insulin. Insulin has to be administered primarily by injection. You cannot take insulin orally at the moment because systems are not, insulin is a hormone. If you try taking it orally, it's going to be destroyed by the enzymes and the acid in the element in your gut. So people who have type 1 diabetes have to inject insulin. It's a lifelong condition, and at least at this point in time, it is not curable. So one needs insulin in order to survive. Thank you.
Okay. Now, Dr. Mokaya, now just linking type 1 diabetes or diabetes with nutrition, what's your take on that?
Yes. All these NCDs, including type 1 diabetes, are amenable or respond to nutrition. As a matter of fact, if we here in Kenya address the issues of nutrition, the right nutrition, or the right diets, actually, in my view, contribute to more than 30 to 40, even in some cases up to 50% of the treatment that we should unleash to take care of not only type 2 diabetes, as Dr. Karikisi said, but even type 1. We know, and I don't know whether our colleague will share those experiences, where people who have type 1 diabetes have adapted certain dietary and nutritional lifestyles that have decreased the amount of insulin they have to inject themselves. So while the type 1s cannot do without insulin, but the amount of insulin, which is related to cost, because these are medications, the hormones that are bought, if we brought in the factor of nutrition, it will not only intervene or cause a reduction in the amount of insulin being injected for type 1 diabetes, but also for people living with sickle cell disease, which are the two key genetic NCDs that within the Kenyan context contribute to a significant burden of disease. I think for me, I'll pause here and say that let's just come on board and share experience. Then we can deal with the elephant in the house in terms of what the solutions are, having identified the problems. So I think I'll just say
Pause there, right? Thank you so much, Dr. Mokaya and Dr. Karikesi. And dear viewer, as mentioned earlier, this is a Healthy Monday. My name is Aida Muzati. We're going to take quite a short break, and as we mentioned, we will bring in Josephine, who has type 1 diabetes. She's going to share with us her experience, and I'm sure with other people who have either type 1 diabetes or type 2 diabetes, they can in some way relate. I'm not saying that they will fully relate, but in a way they will relate. So we're going to take a very short break, and in a few I'll be reading your comments or questions from our SMS or WhatsApp number. That is 0111220044. We take a very short break. We'll be right back. Those were 40 minutes.
Yeah.
What?
Because 35. Of this guy.
now and going forward. We have a lot of family programs, and this being a Christian commercial station, we will partner with you as institutions, as individuals, so that we are able to reach out to the entire world. One person said that my parish is the entire world, and I believe that Kirk TV is going globally, and therefore bring your business. We are going to advertise it and also partner with you.
I support Kirk TV. Tujenge Kirk TV. To partner with us, send your financial support to pay bill number 401-9613, account partner. Pay bill number 401-9613, account partner.
Health, mental, physical, and of course, spiritual. Healthy Monday with me, Aida Munzati. Kwani kwa pamoja, afya yetu ni muhimu.
Over the years, PCEA Kikuyu Hospital has grown to be one of the foremost medical facilities and community-friendly hospitals in the region. PCEA Kikuyu Hospital offers high-quality and competent therapeutic, preventive, promotive, and rehabilitative services that distinguish it from others. For this reason, the moderator of the 23rd General Assembly, Right Reverend Patrick Thegumutahi, together with the PCEA Kikuyu Hospital, proudly invites you for an ISO certification awarding ceremony at PCEA Head Office this Tuesday, 26th of July, 2022. The ceremony will be graced by the PCEA Health Board Chairman, Very Reverend Dr. Jessica Mau, PCEA Health Board Secretary, Reverend Paul Karaoke, the Deputy Secretary General Assembly, and the very able CEO and Administrator for PCEA Kikuyu Hospital, Mr. Joel Jamhuri. Join us in this huge milestone as we share the honor of accreditation with our partners and stakeholders, in addition to recognizing the hospital's efforts in Kenya and beyond. The event will be broadcasted live on Kirk TV from 2 p.m. Tune in to Kirk TV on Signet, Kirk TV Kenya on Facebook and YouTube to celebrate with us.
Kirk TV is a place to be. Let us build our own brand. Let us labor for this, because this is where the true mission is, and therefore partner with us. Keep it at Kirk, and we'll go far together.
To partner with us, send your financial support to pay bill number 401-9613, account partner. Pay bill number 401-9613, account partner.
Health, mental, physical, and of course, spiritual. Healthy Monday with me, Aida Munzati. Kwani kwa pamoja, afya yetu ni muhimu.
Over the years, PCEA Kikuyu Hospital has grown to be one of the foremost medical facilities and community-friendly hospitals in the region. PCEA Kikuyu Hospital offers high-quality and competent therapeutic, preventive, promotive, and rehabilitative services that distinguish it from others. For this reason, the moderator of the 23rd General Assembly, Right Reverend Patrick Thegumutahi, together with the PCEA Kikuyu Hospital, proudly invites you for an ISO certification awarding ceremony at PCEA Head Office this Tuesday, 26th of July, 2022. The ceremony will be graced by the PCEA Health Board Chairman, Very Reverend Dr. Jessica Mau, PCEA Health Board Secretary, Reverend Paul Karaoke, the Deputy Secretary General Assembly, and the very able CEO and Administrator for PCEA Kikuyu Hospital, Mr. Joel Jamhuri. Join us in this huge milestone as we share the honor of accreditation with our partners and stakeholders, in addition to recognizing the hospital's efforts in Kenya and beyond. The event will be broadcasted live on Kirk TV from 2 p.m. Tune into Kirk TV on Signet, Kirk TV Kenya on Facebook and YouTube to celebrate with us.
Ilivyo kawaida ya siku ya Jumanne ni siku ya biashara. Mimi wako Vincent Kirosi, mpishi mpakuzi. Nitakuwa na biashara nawe tangu macheo hadi machweo. Tutapiga kazi, tujenge mali na siwajua tena mdau. Kimchango kuchangizana bana.
On Civic Wednesday, we examine your readiness for the forthcoming general elections as a voter. Join me, Dennis Munene, as we put every matter into context. Kumbuka, kura yako ni haki yako.
Well, as mentioned, we are looking at the burden of non-communicable diseases in Kenya. We just looked at what exactly NCDs are. NCDs are non-communicable diseases. So we looked at what NCDs are with the help of Dr. Mokaya and Dr. Karekezi. And on set right now, as mentioned, I'm being joined by Josephine Gitahi, who is a type 1 diabetes champion. She's going to share with us her experience. Dear viewer, today is Health Monday, and feel free to share in your comments using our number, that is 0111220044. We will be sure, or we will be happy to read in your questions to our doctors as well as your comments, and you will receive the answers right on set. So Josephine, karibu sana, hope you're doing well.
Yeah, asante. So my name is Josephine Wamboi Gitahi. I'm a type 1 champion, diabetes champion. This is my 17th year. I'm a strong advocate for type 1. I know people know a lot about type 2 diabetes, but type 1 diabetes is a rare disease. It's not commonly known. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, I'm from an organization called Young and Sweet. Yeah, it's a group of young people who are type 1. So our main agenda is creating awareness in the community about type 1 diabetes. Yes.
Right. So you've mentioned you've had diabetes type 1 for 17 years. You can just take us through your journey pole pole. Which year were you diagnosed? How many years were you? And when the doctor told you, or as you became older, just understanding what exactly you were having, how was it for you?
Okay. It wasn't a smooth sailing. It is difficult. So I was diagnosed in the year 2005. I was 12 years, very young. I was still in primary school. I didn't know anything about diabetes, but the only thing I knew it was diabetes in Kiswahili, Kisukari. Yeah, when we were learning different types of name, both in English and in Swahili. So yeah, and it's hereditary because in my family many people suffer diabetes. So I got it from my family.
Are they immediate family members or?
Yes, they are immediate. My grandmother, my grandfather, my cousins, yeah, from my father's side. They are diabetic, most of the family members. Yeah, so the one thing about diabetes is the denial stage, because if I come and tell you, Ida, you have cancer, God forbid, you are going to be in denial, you won't accept it. So the difficult part of it about diabetes is the denial stage, which most of the type 1 suffer, the denial stage. So I was into denial stage. Then there was the introduction of the insulin therapy, which is the only medication for type 1, which it involves you injecting yourself daily. Yeah, so it wasn't easy for me because I had to accept the fact that I'm going to be on insulin for the rest of my life, injecting.
So that was in 2005.
Yeah.
You look young. So how old were you then?
I was 12.
12.
Yes.
Okay. And as years went by, when now you came to understand what exactly type 1 diabetes was, how was it for you, other than the denial? Because definitely it's a journey. Yeah. How was it for you?
It was still difficult, but when I came to understand it, it now became easier for me. Because, okay, one sure thing about diabetes, management of diabetes, is the acceptance part. If you accept the condition, managing it will be easier. So yeah, so it was a process, because anyway, I was still in school. So after primary school, I had to go to high school, which I went to a boarding school. So we really face a lot of stigmatization from our peers, because they also don't know about diabetes. So it wasn't easy for me, because I also faced stigmatization, because people seeing me injecting myself, my peers, they would ask, why is she injecting herself? So yeah, and at that time also, you know, insulin, the insulin requires proper storage. So I'm in a boarding school, I need to install my insulin well, so I had an improvised refrigerator. That was a pot. I soak it with cotton wool and spirit, then I put my insulin. So, and I put it under my bed. So people didn't understand.
Like what did they
what
think?
am I
Maybe
doing?
you were
They thought it was witchcraft. Yeah, and also the teachers, you know, your teachers are your parents, your caregiver, full-time caregiver in school. And most of the teachers don't know about how to handle type 1 diabetes. Yes, so it wasn't easy, it was difficult. I faced a lot of stigmatization. But thanks to God, I mitigated through all those challenges, and I cleared for the 4 years. Still in boarding school.
Same school?
Yes, the same school. Yes, and the funny thing is, when I went back for my certificate after a long period, they thought I had died, and they were shocked
to see you.
Yeah, to see me. Yes, but then I've learned a lot about diabetes. What I can say is diabetes has been a blessing in disguise for me, because what I love about diabetes is it made me accountable and responsible. Yes.
So you're just trying to look at diabetes on the positive side.
Yes, on the positive side.
Would you say, or is that something that you will tell to other people with diabetes, not just type 1 but type 2 as well?
Yes. One thing about diabetes does not define us, and we love telling people that don't concentrate on our condition rather than on our well-being, because diabetes is not a disease, it's a condition. It only becomes a disease if you mismanage it. Now you would start suffering from the macro and micro cardiovascular and other complications, diabetic complications. But if you control it, no one will know. And again, diabetes is not a limiting factor for us. We can be whoever we want to be. Yes.
True.
Yeah.
True.
So if you see me, don't feel sorry for me. I usually tell people, I feel sorry for you because you don't have diabetes. For me, diabetes has made me go to higher heights. Yeah.
Okay, so just talking of stigma, you've talked of stigma, let me say, while in school. Do you still face stigma even in your current age?
No. At my current age, no, because I'm a advocate for it.
And you talk about it.
I talk about it, I educate people about it, because those people who stigmatize you, I don't blame them, because they don't know about diabetes. They are unaware about it. So our main work is to create awareness about it and educate people about it. Yes.
Okay. You've mentioned of how you used to store your insulin.
Yes.
Having done health for quite some time, I know that insulin storage is quite a challenge for many families, especially those that are a little bit not so well off. Yeah. So you are storing it in a pot.
Yeah.
Just let our audience know, how should one store their insulin, or how is insulin stored?
So insulin is stored in a refrigerator, but for in our current situation, storing insulin under 30% room temperature, it's okay. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
And do you just mentioned that you have, like, can I say, a group of other type 1s?
Yes.
So what's your main goal, or what's your message even to people outside?
So our main goal is creating awareness for type 1 diabetes, and also, you know, it's a rare disease. So among 10 or 50 people, you just find only one person suffering from type 1 diabetes. So what we do is we want to create hope for those type 1 diabetes. We want to eradicate hopelessness, loneliness among those type 1, because most of these type 1 think they are alone. Because for me, I was diagnosed at Kenyatta, and when I used to go to clinics at Kenyatta, I didn't go to the pediatric, it was the other clinic for grown up, and I was alone, so I didn't like going for clinics. So yeah, we want to create a community, a support group for type 1 diabetes. That way we can support each other mentally, so through sharing our experiences, yes, how we handle our day-to-day life, yes, and also creating and educating people around us, because yes, you have to educate those who are around you, because for example, if I get a hypoglycemic episode, that is, if my blood sugars go down, those people around me know
they need to understand what to do.
What to do. Yes, also in school, teachers need to understand what to do. With the type 1s in school, the matrons, they need to be equipped with information and knowledge about type 1 diabetes. Yes.
Okay, thank you so much, Josephine. And to our viewer, just to let you know that you can send in as much or as many questions as you will wish through our SMS number, that is 01112220044. Feel free to ask Josephine any question. If you're outside there and you have type 1 diabetes, feel free to share with Josephine, or even just share your experience. Or do you have a loved one, a brother or a younger sister with type 1 diabetes? Feel free to share that once again on our SMS or WhatsApp number, that is 011122200.
Yes.
So Josephine, you've just shared over insulin, yeah, and what exactly to do maybe when your sugars go down. Just educate our audience, yeah. In case your sugars go down, or in case someone around us with type 1 diabetes, their sugars go down, what exactly should we do?
So most of the time, we like telling people that hypoglycemic, it's an emergency case. It's not good, actually. So most of the time, we like telling the type 1s, avoid getting those episodes of hypoglycemic. But if you get one, the first thing you have to do, you have to treat it very fast. So yeah, at least if you are having a hypo, and take something that is sugary. Most of the time we say you treat it with 15. 15, I mean that is a small spoon of sugar. Yeah, 3 of them. Yeah.
So at a go?
Yes, at a go.
Okay.
Depending on the levels of your sugar, how low are they? Yeah.
All right.
If they are very low, just try and take a soda and treat it. Yeah.
Or just to bring the sugar, so to balance the sugar.
Yeah, to balance the sugar. But what I can tell my viewers, try and avoid those episodes of hypoglycemia.
How do they do that? How do they avoid?
So one, the amount of insulin you inject. So check you don't do an overdose of your insulin. Then after you do it, eat well, and also snack. Avoid late meals. So because that might cause an hypoglycemic. Don't inject and forget to eat. Yes, don't, because that's a life-threatening episode. So if you inject, eat, snack, yes, and snack healthy. Yeah, that is what I tell my. Yeah.
All right. So just briefly of your experience in acquiring insulin, and maybe going, or how exactly do you buy? I'm sure it's quite expensive, yeah?
Very expensive.
So how do you acquire them?
Okay, what I can say, DMI, Diabetes Management Information Center, they have our back for type 1s. So yeah, I have registered at DMI, so I get my insulin there. So you register at 1,000, then you'll be getting for children and young people. Yeah, okay. So it's cheaper there. You get your insulin syringes, and also you get to have a session with their clinician, a nurse. Yeah, yeah.
So generally now in terms of type 1 diabetes, just briefly, maybe in 1 minute, what would you want to tell our audience about type 1, or what awareness would you want to create?
So one thing, that managing diabetes is very expensive, because one, you require strips, there is syringes, and there is the insulin. So, and diabetes and hypertension, we say they are diseases of numbers, and you can't manage what you don't know. So you require the strips. So first to the government, we plead with them, they need to reduce taxes on these strips, because we can't manage what we don't know. So if we get these strips at a very low cost, it will be healthy, yeah, because we require them. We need to check our sugars regularly. Yeah, in the morning, fasting sugars. After you take your meals, after 2 hours, every 2 hours after you take your meal, and before you go to bed. So strips are very, very expensive. So yeah, to our government, yes, we plead with them. Then also insulin is very expensive. If we can get it at a very low cost, even if, and we also wish one day we'll be getting insulin for free, because we can't do without insulin. We are powered by insulin. So if we can get it for free, it will be better.
All right.
The other thing is we need to test for our vitals. So tests are very expensive. So if NHIF, we have a comprehensive cover for our NHIF, where we also can do these tests for free, it will be good, because we also need to prevent our organs from failing, maybe due to uncontrolled diabetes. So I'm thinking if we get this test for free, if they can be covered by our NHIF, yeah, it will be very, very good. Because diabetes, controlling and managing diabetes, it's easy. But again, if you get a complication, it becomes more expensive. And for us to prevent the complication, what do? We need screening, prevention, and prevention is better than cure.
True.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much, Josephine. Now that's a call to the government and call to other policymakers in terms of our health, specifically type 1 diabetes. That's a call to the government to subsidize everything in terms of treatment of treatment and management of type 1 diabetes. Thank you so much, dear viewer, for tuning in. This is not the end of our discussion. Remember, this is Healthy Monday, so you can keep on sending your comments, questions and messages on our SMS and WhatsApp number, that is 0111220044. We take a very short break. We'll be coming back with Dr. Bokaya and Dr. Karikezi to continue with the discussion on the burden of non-communicable diseases in Kenya.
Thika Motor Dealers, the #1 dealer for Isuzu brand motor vehicles in conjunction with Family Bank, now have a mouth-watering deal for PCEA churches and their sponsored schools. Thika Motor Dealers are now offering up to 100% financing for buses ranging from the 25-seater, 33-seater, 46-seater and 67-seater. For more information, visit TMD dealer shops in Thika, Ruaka, Karatina, Athi River and Machakos, or even call us on 0800-720-797.
Thika Motor Dealers, your trusted logistics partner.
Welcome to Pimaya Motors Mombasa, dealers in new and used Japanese, German and European cars. We have all varieties from saloon cars, matatus, buses and trucks. All our prices are currently discounted. Contact us today for the best deal on 0725 725 319, 0738 111 228 or 0724 017 913. Your satisfaction, our joy.
I'm Celestine Kemunto. I'm taking a bachelor's in business information technology. I chose ZTech because, first of all, ZTech has been ranked among the best in ICT, and I thought it will be best. It will be best for my course. First of all, there are so many ICT labs in ZTech University, which enables students, mostly those who are pursuing IT courses, to get to know more about their courses, of which the labs have so many computers which have Ethernet, which is easier for them to browse. If I were given a chance to choose another university, I'll definitely choose ZTech University.
Apply today. ZTech University. Invent your future.
Kirk TV is a place to be. Let us build our own brand. Let us labor for this, because this is where the true mission is, and therefore partner with us. Keep it at Kirk, and we'll go far together.
To partner with us, send your financial support to pay bill number 401-9613, account partner. Pay bill number 401-9613, account partner.
Ilivyo kawaida ya siku ya Jumanne ni siku ya biashara. Mimi wako Vincent Kirosi, mpishi mpakuzi. Nitakuwa na biashara nawe tangu macheo hadi machweo. Tutapiga kazi, tujenge mali, na siwajua tena mdau. Kimchango kuchangizana bana.
On Civic Wednesday, we examine your readiness for the forthcoming general elections as a voter. Join me, Dennis Munene, as we put every matter into context. Kumbuka, kura yako ni haki yako.
Ilivyo kawaida ya siku ya Jumanne ni siku ya biashara. Mimi wako Vincent Kirosi, mpishi mpakuzi. Nitakuwa na biashara nawe tangu macheo hadi machweo. Tutapiga kazi, tujenge mali, na siwajua tena mdau. Kimchango kuchangizana bana.
On Civic Wednesday, we examine your readiness for the forthcoming general elections as a voter. Join me, Dennis Munene, as we put every matter into context. Kumbuka, kura yako ni haki yako.
Since family means no one is left out, join me, Faith Kaulu, on Family Saturday, where everyone will have something. Remember, family is not only important, it's everything. So let's do this together.
Health. Mental, physical, and of course, spiritual. Healthy Monday with me, Aida Munzati. Kwani kwa pamoja, afya yetu ni muhimu. Dear viewer, this is the third session of our discussion on the burden of non-communicable diseases in Kenya, and Dr. Karekezi and Dr. Mokaya are back in studio. We're just going to discuss over the session that we just had with Josephine Gitahi, who has type 1 diabetes. Keep on sending your messages, comments, and questions on our SMS and WhatsApp number, that is 0111220044. Remember, we are coming to you live on all our social media pages: Facebook, Kirk TV Kenya, and YouTube as well. Twitter, Kirk TV_Kenya, Instagram, KirkTV.Kenya. So, Dr. Mukaya and Dr. Karekezi, karibuni tena. Let us just digest a little bit on the conversation that we just had with Josephine. Daktari, first of all, Dr. Karekezi, the issue of insulin. You will see how Josephine will talk and even plead to the government on the issue of insulin from where you sit as the executive director of NCDAC. What solutions maybe can the government offer to these people with type 1 diabetes?
I think one of the things we're trying to do is to have conversations with NHIF, because at the moment, I know there are some changes in NHIF which are going on. We're not sure exactly what is going to be covered, but one of the things that we've been advocating for is for insulin to be covered as part of NHIF and to be provided at minimal cost if there has to be a cost. It is a life-saving medicine, and people with type 1 diabetes are not going to survive if they don't have access to insulin. We understand that there is going to be a cost associated with it, but how can NHIF come and at least cushion persons living with type 1 diabetes in terms of access to insulin? And it's not just access to insulin, but also access to the monitoring systems that are essential for them to monitor their blood sugar. Because if you're living with especially living with type 1 diabetes, you need to take multiple injections in a day. If you're not able to monitor how the insulin that you're administering is dealing with the sugar that is being generated in the body, it means you may be living with very high sugar levels, and these are the sugar levels which are ultimately going to damage your eyes, going to damage your kidney. You're going to probably end up with damage to your other blood vessels, your heart, and so on, and also maybe even get foot wounds which will not heal. So in order for people with type 1 diabetes to be able to better manage their condition, they need insulin, yes, but they also need access to a system to monitor the blood sugar so that they can at least know, one, how much insulin do I need? Because the insulin dose is dependent on what your activity levels are, how much food you're eating, your stress levels. So there are different things which are going to impact on the dose of insulin that you require. So for best treatment for people with type 1 diabetes is to have access to a mechanism to monitor their sugar. I know at the moment what is available and which is now being changed is like a 2-dose daily dose of insulin. You take one in the morning, one in the evening. It's a mixed combination, it's a fixed dose. But what the government is also trying to do is to bring in the beta bolus, where you take a long-acting insulin at night, and then you have short-acting insulin as you take your meals. Because what you need to control is the sugar levels which are coming from the meals that you're eating. It gives you a much better control. Obviously, unfortunately, it's slightly more expensive, but it gives you the better control for your insulin. Because when you consider that a person living with type 1 diabetes could have been diagnosed at age 3 weeks, I think that is the youngest we have had in the program that we run, is going to live with this condition for the rest of their life. So they really need to have the best monitoring system that they can have to try and prevent the complications which come from uncontrolled diabetes. So it's, yes, insulin is key, but also the monitoring system is also key. Those are discussions we've been trying to have with NHIF, and I guess we're still in the process. So. We hope at least something will be done about, one, access to insulin, and also access to the glucometers and the strips. The strips. Yeah. All right.
Dr. Mukaya, your comment on the same, even as we bring in the issue of let me still insist on nutrition, yes, and lifestyle.
Yes, thank you, Ida, for allowing us to come back and to pick a ride on what just been so eloquently shared. Type 1 diabetes is just one NCD. I think the audience needs to understand that. It's just one of the many NCDs, fairly rare, but increasingly for many factors that we will probably discuss, increasing in this country, and therefore we can't quite really, Dr. Karekezi, call it a genetic disease. It has to do with many multifactorial factors, some we don't know, but it's an element of autoimmunity, which I think comes in from not just what the person who has diabetes is exposed to, but what the parents, the mother especially, who had perhaps gestational diabetes, had during conception, what she ate. So nutrition comes in strongly as an intervention for reducing even the amount of insulin, like Dr. Karekezi said, from BD, a daily dose, twice daily dose, the food that is eaten. But before I even go into the details of type 1 diabetes, Josephine has so very eloquently shared. Just imagine, as Dr. Karekesi has correctly said, this is a lifelong condition. Once you're diagnosed with diabetes, type 1 or type 2, or with cancer, or with any NCD, rheumatic heart, cardiovascular condition, you're going to live with this condition, which is chronic, over a lifetime. Now, what I would like to share that probably Dr. Karekesi hasn't covered is that with the increasing burden, the level of the burden of NCDs, good people, is such that if you were to ask me, even if I go specifically to this type 1 diabetes, is at the level of what you would call a national security threat. That's a big thing to say in front of live TV. So just take type 1 diabetes and its challenges with access to care, quality care and so on, and multiply that by a factor of all these other more common NCDs like cardiovascular conditions causing stroke, death, cancers, long-term treatment, medication, family involved, mental conditions, the stress of payments, the deaths, the funerals, go to the respiratory issue and so on. They are not only a health issue, but I'd like to say that these conditions, including type 1, are an integrated developmental issue with significant economic, socio-economic consequences. Just to give a quick statistic so that the audience understands how big the burden of NCDs is. From a recent World Bank survey, the projections are that in this country, Kenya, the gross expenditure on NCDs annually is in the range of 250 billion to 300 billion. That is how much NCDs are costing the economy and are costing Kenyans to manage and treat. And that's why we can't access insulin, for example, to ensure that those of us who have these conditions are adequately treated with medications that are accessible, that are of good quality, and enable them to live a good quality of life. So if we were able to intervene, of course from an initial point of view, rather than providing the drugs, if we as a country were to appreciate and intervene at those 4 risk factors that are modifiable, the smoking, the alcohol, the physical exercise, and the diet. Evidence shows that people who are have changed their dietary habits, what they consume, and have removed issues of toxins in the food. Again, I want to face the audience and say the elephant in the house that's contributing to the increasing burden of NCDs is agrochemical use in agriculture, in food production, such that although we're eating food that is nutritious, the food is contaminated with environmental pollutants, from agrochemicals to heavy metals to bacteria, E. coli. These are things that at policy level, at individual level, at consumer level, if we adjust, we will significantly reduce the burden of non-communicable diseases, including type 1. The cost of type 1 diabetes in terms of insulin and so on. So I'll just pause there and let you take over from there.
So to our viewers, please continue sending in SMSs, text messages and questions using our SMS number 0111220044. Remember, this is Healthy Monday under the Kirk TV's Partnership Week, and throughout the day we will be discussing on nothing else but health matters. Now to you, Dr. Karekesi, there is a question that has just been sent. It's on the minor non-communicable diseases, and that's where I would like us to dwell now. Just tell us, you mentioned of Down syndrome, epilepsy, sickle cell, and the other ones. Just tell us, there's a question on what causes convulsions. I'm sure this is now with epilepsy or...
Specifically the epilepsy, the convulsions arise as a result of an imbalance in neurotransmitters in the brain. So neurotransmitters are chemical agents which communicate between the nerves. And we have what are called excitatory neurotransmitters, and we have inhibitory neurotransmitters. So in the case of epilepsy, the inhibitory neurotransmitters, I would say, probably are not functioning in the way that they should. But so there's an imbalance in the neurotransmitter levels. And as we said before, I think the body was designed very intricately. The body is all about balance. Balance between hormones, or different types of hormones which are actually either activating or deactivating, or neurotransmitters which are exciting or inhibiting, you know, those kinds of issues. So there's an imbalance in the neurotransmitters, which may be due to various reasons. Yeah.
All right, thank you so much for that. Something maybe we touch, since we are out of time, we can touch on, we've mentioned Down syndrome, yeah?
Yes.
Hypertension we haven't. Or we did the cardiovasculars.
Cardiovascular, hypertension, high blood pressure.
All right.
It's a risk factor for cardiovascular diseases. So if you have very high blood pressure, it means you're going to probably damage your blood vessels, the capillaries especially, and this is can lead, for example, to a stroke, or else can lead to a heart attack and other cardiovascular diseases. Yeah.
Okay.
But basically, maybe just to add on to that, hypertension is actually about 25% of adults in Kenya probably living with hypertension, with high blood pressure, the majority of whom are not aware. Most people tend to be diagnosed with high blood pressure when they've had an incidence. We've had cases of people on duty with blood pressures in excess of 200, over 100, which is basically a stroke waiting to happen. And the thing to remember about high blood pressure is you really don't feel that you have a problem, and it tends to be quite develop over time, I would expect. So you kind of get used to having a headache or feeling tired. It's non-specific, which is why it is called the silent killer. Yeah. So you don't get overt symptoms initially as the pressure is rising. You probably start getting your headaches and everything when your pressure is like really high. So a lot of people tend to be diagnosed when they've actually had an incidence, or if they go for a routine screening, like some of these free medical camps which are there, you'll probably be detected there. But people will not go because, like, I'm feeling sick.
True.
So that is the major risk with high blood pressure. Also the major risk with type 2 diabetes. A lot of people tend to be diagnosed when they already have a complication set in. Maybe you're having issues with your eyes, or you have a wound which is not healing, or you have, things like that. Or maybe a lot of people are also diagnosed when they actually going into renal failure. Diabetes is the leading cause. Diabetes and hypertension are the leading causes of renal failure. And as you know, we have lots of renal dialysis units in different parts of our country. But we really need to, and I'm not saying that we don't deal with the issues of dialysis. Let's look at what is causing these problems. The diabetes, the high blood pressure. And if you can manage the diabetes, you can manage your high blood pressure, the chances of you getting to kidney failure will be reduced or delayed, or may be reduced. So, I think we really need to start looking at what are the factors behind what we are seeing. I know Dr. Mokai has spoken a lot about the food that we're eating. There's also the aspects of air pollution, the aspects of alcohol, tobacco, which I think the government sees more as a revenue generator for government because of the taxes. But what effect is this tobacco use and alcohol use having on the individual and on the health budget? Now the government is paying more to either manage these conditions, to set up these cancer units, to set up the dialysis units, but they're not investing, or they're not looking at how can we prevent the problem happening. So we really need to start looking at what is happening behind the scenes. Why are people having all these conditions? What can we do to try and at least stop people progressing to kidney failure, to having heart attacks, having strokes, having other diabetes complications, going blind, and so on. And even for these young adults living with type 1 diabetes, how can we facilitate access to insulin? I know at the moment there are some access programs, but access programs, this is where partners come in and subsidize the cost or provide it at no cost to the individual. But these have a finite life. Yeah. What happens after the end of these programs? The government really needs to step in and look at facilitating access to these life-saving medicines. Because without insulin, the children will die. I mean, there's no two ways about it.
True.
Yeah.
Now, you've just mentioned of the issue of, let me say, someone with type 2 diabetes ending up with kidney failure. I was just having a conversation yesterday with a friend of mine, and I don't know whether this would be the fault of the medics that were looking at this particular person, or what the problem was exactly, but if a doctor is treating, let me say, diabetes, is there a need for this particular doctor to perform other let me say, tests to this particular person, so that the medicines or the drugs that this patient is taking doesn't end up destroying other parts of this patient's body?
Okay, there are two sides. Okay, there are two issues there. We all need to remember that all medicines are poisons. I mean, that's a fact.
True.
It's only the dose which makes the difference between the beneficial effects of the medicine or the other toxic effects of the medicine. And that is not to say that you're going into renal failure because of the medicines that you're taking. But the other issue is for across all non-communicable diseases, because you're going to be living with them for the rest of their life. The key component of your management or your treatment is education. You need, if I'm living with a condition, I need to understand what the condition is. I need to understand what I should be doing for myself in terms of my diet, in terms of my medicine use, in terms of my physical activity, and everything else. So I think one of the areas where we have challenges is because our health systems tend to be overcrowded. How much time does a doctor have to educate a person living with diabetes about what they should be doing? But there are other people who can come in and do that. But I think there's basically information gap, because if I'm living with type 1 diabetes, I need to be taught about the insulin that I use, how I should use it, how I should store it, what should I look out for, how should I inject, where should I inject, how frequently should I inject in that particular site. How can I measure my sugar level? That's why I was talking about the issues of the glucometers, the strips. How can I monitor my condition? What should I eat? So there's a big component for all NCDs. A big component of the management is education. Enabling the person living with a condition to understand, what can I do for myself? Yes, I will have, if my diabetes is well controlled, I'll probably have a 3-monthly appointment to go back to the clinic to be checked and to collect my medicines. But what should I be doing in between? On a daily basis, what should I be doing? The other thing, as I mentioned, you need to monitor. There's something else I was going to say which I have not forgotten. But I shall remember. Yeah, so education is a key component of management of all NCDs. Doesn't matter whether it's cancer, if it is cardiovascular, diabetes, Down syndrome, Alzheimer's, everything. You need to understand your condition. You need to understand, what can I do for myself? And what should I do when I go to the clinic? What should I look out for? So that when I go to the clinic, I'm able to tell the doctor, this is what I have noticed. What should I do about it? Yeah. Yeah.
Let's as you remember, do you remember that point? Dr. Mokaya was really nodding, and you mentioned of something, just to build up on what she said, self-care in terms of non-communicable diseases.
Yeah. That's the good news, that these NCDs are not conditions that are amenable to change from the Dactaris. We ourselves can do a lot, as Dr. Karakis has mentioned, to reduce the impact and the severity of these NCDs by doing a few simple things. First of all, having the knowledge of how these diseases occur, how these conditions manifest, and then doing things ourselves that include how we live our lives. Diet, nutrition, it's extremely important, like I said earlier. I can't overemphasize that. prevention is better than cure. But even if you already have the condition, you can reverse by allowing your body to realign itself, by providing the right nutrients, by eating the right food. Yeah, more safer, diverse vegetables, what we call the Pareto Ratio, 80-20. The food that you consume should be, as much as possible, 80% plant-based, 20% animal-based. As much as possible, this food should be safe and healthy, grown without agrochemicals, grown without synthetic fertilizers that bring in these toxins that then interfere with your metabolic balance, resulting in the manifestation of all diseases. And as you said, even for those genetic conditions like sickle cell disease, diabetes type 1, they are actually, you can reduce the dose. So the idea here is, let's enlighten the populace that there is a need. There are things you can do you yourself. There is hope. Therefore, the 250 to 300 billion that this country spends on NCDs can be reduced by half or more if each one of us can know, diagnose, screen, identify, manage, and take care in an integrated manner. We and the doctors should be a team. We do our bit, the doctors do their bit, the medications are available, but the most important bit that I want the audience to go home with is that there are things you can take control of your health by what you eat, how you live, how you sleep, how you breathe, how you think, how you interface. That is, for me, the punch that I like for people to take home message, that is not hopeless. There is hope.
There is hope.
That the burden of non-communicable diseases can actually be managed if we work together as a team.
All right.
Ida, it can change.
Okay.
We know people, for example, who had weight of up to 120 kilos, and because of changing their diet and their lifestyle, using interventions like intermittent fasting, they've come down to 85 kilos. They're looking younger, they're looking healthier, they're robust, their blood pressure has come down, their diabetes has come down, and other issues, especially for men that I don't want to mention on live TV.
All right. As you always put it, Dr. Mukaya, let food
be your medicine. Absolutely.
Great.
I think I've remembered.
You can just go ahead.
Yeah, you asked me what has the doctor not done. If you have these chronic conditions, there are specific things that you need, which need to be monitored. Like, for example, if you have diabetes, you need to have an eye check every year. You need to get your kidney functions tested on a regular basis. They need to check your feet just to make sure that you still have sensation in your feet, there's still adequate blood flow to your feet, because diabetes is a leading cause of preventable amputations, second to road traffic accidents. So there's some things that need to be done on a regular basis for you to be able to monitor and for the doctor to know that complications are not setting in. And if complications seem to be setting in, what can be done about them? So that, there are things that can be done. So, so maybe, healthcare providers need to be aware, they should be aware of the routine tests that need to be done on a regular basis. Every clinic visit, if you don't have a glucometer, you should measure, the sugar should be measured. If at least every 6 months, you should have an HbA1c test done. This is a test which shows you the average sugar levels over the last period of time. And as I mentioned, the kidney function tests, eye tests every year, and other tests that need to be conducted. Again, one of the major things with diabetes, as I said, is the issue of, especially type 2 diabetes, is the issue of foot wounds which don't heal, which may result in an amputation. If you've had one amputation, the chances of having another one are much higher. And you can all understand that an amputation is a life-changing experience, which really nobody would want to go through. But simple checks like looking at the sensation in your foot, or just checking the blood flow to your feet, those can be life-saving, at least in terms of amputation and so forth. So those are basic tests which can be done on a regular basis for everybody living with diabetes. Yeah.
Okay, maybe there is someone, I and Dr. Mukaya are definitely understanding the issue of the eye and the feet. Maybe just in a layman's language for the audience to understand, how does diabetes now affect eyesight?
Okay, what diabetes does, as we said right at the beginning, diabetes is a condition where you have high blood sugar levels in the blood. And as we keep saying, there's supposed to be a balance in your body. So if there's an imbalance, it means it's going to have an effect on something else. So what the high sugar levels will do, they may be, for example, cause damage to the nerves in the eyes and also in the feet. So if they cause damage to the nerves in the eyes, this is where the blindness can come in. Okay, you may eventually end up going blind because the nerve, basically the nerves in the eyes have been damaged, as well as damage the capillaries in the eyes. So these are the things which are likely to cause blindness. Similarly, in the feet, you have the nerves and the capillaries, the small blood vessels in the feet. These are the parts which are likely to be most affected by high sugar levels. So damage to the nerves in the feet means that you no longer have sensation in your feet. It means you can step on a needle or a nail. You won't actually feel it. Yes. And you end up, because you cannot feel, and most people don't actually check their feet, that small prick or blister can develop into a big wound. The other issue is, as I said, the sugar levels can damage the small blood vessels in the feet. Now, if the blood vessels in the feet are damaged and you have an injury in your foot, it means it's going to take much longer to heal. One, you cannot feel because you've lost sensation, your nerves have been damaged. Two, there's poor blood flow to your feet, which means it's going to take much longer to heal. By the time you discover that you have an issue with your foot, especially since most of us really don't check our feet, that has become a wound which will be very difficult to manage or to treat because of the poor blood flow. Remember, blood flow is required to take the nutrients, the oxygen and everything to different parts of the body. So if your blood circulation, blood flow to the feet has been damaged, it means it's going to take so much longer for that wound to heal. In the unfortunate incidence that the wound doesn't heal, it means you may end up with gangrene, which means that the foot actually dies because it's not getting the nutrients, it's not getting the that part, could be your toe, could be your foot. It means that then to save your life, then they'll have to amputate that part which is gone gangrenous. Similarly, the same with the kidneys. The issue of damage to the capillaries in the kidneys, that is how the kidney damage comes about. And all this damage is being caused by the sugar, which is either, to put it in a layman's term, it's being deposited, for example, on your nerves, it's being deposited in your capillaries. Obviously, there's another mechanisms, but ultimately it is the sugar levels which are causing the damage.
Okay. Now, Dr. Mukaya, let's bring in mental health as a non-communicable disease, and just very briefly, as you link them, I don't know if there is a link between what I'm eating, how what I eat can help manage maybe the stress levels that I'm having.
Thank you, Aida. That's a big one. Just to follow up from what Dr. Karekezi has shared. There's no health without the component of mental health.
Mental health, true.
And the factors that cause mental dysfunction are systemic. The layman's language for systemic is that they generalize, like Dr. Karekezi was sharing. They're not just health issues that cause mental health scenarios. Have metabolic dysfunction. They are also issues of how we live our lives. And that's why there is a phrase we call the quadruple crisis or crisis. These are all interrelated factors that one of the manifestations is the mental health conditions. And it's very rampant, not just in this country as an NCD, but globally. Let me try and use a very simple analogy. If we are spraying our food with agrochemical toxins. These toxins are destroying the soil, and they're making it impossible for the soil to access certain micronutrients. You're polluting the waters, you're polluting the air. Then we are feeding on these crops or plants that have less nutrients. So we are eating these plants and some of the animal products that of course eat these plants. So by the time this food gets into our system, it has toxins, it has less nutrients. Toxins meaning something causing harm, what we call inflammation, and less nutrients causing deficiency. Certain diseases like diabetes type 2 have been associated with a lack of magnesium, for example, and manganese, and selenium. These are details on nutrition. So when this happens, and our body is not in a state of metabolic function, stability, it manifests in conditions all over the body, including affecting our thinking, our stress levels. If there is not enough food, you're in an environment where there's poverty, there is hunger, there's famine. These are all factors that eventually manifest what we call downstream, with persons finding it difficult to access food, to access good nutrition, to access good healthcare. And when all these factors are put together, they manifest as mental conditions. Some of them are metabolic, and some of them are due to stress. Stress from social, economic inadequacies and insufficiencies. So in summary, we say, I would share with the audience that food is medicine, and we can grow healthy food. Yeah. In addition to that, I can say that NCDs as an increasing burden should be viewed, good people, as a developmental issue and not just as a health issue. This applies for diabetes type 1. It actually interfaces with all the NCDs. So there is hope, good people. The hope is that we, together, from policymakers to researchers to different stakeholders at national level, at county level, at the community level, at the family level, and most importantly, ourselves, should be proactive in not only understanding, and this is why we're having this session, of what causes NCDs. The good news is that most of these NCDs are things that we ourselves can do something proactively through self-care to reduce the burden. So I would not want to leave this session with people thinking that the increasing burden is reaching a level where it's now a national security threat, and therefore we are doomed, but to conclude by saying that there is hope. And that hope has to do with you, Ida, and myself, and Dr. Karekezi, and everyone together, proactively self-care, taking care, getting checks regularly, exercising, eating right, and for policymakers, advocating. Right now, there's all this political noise going around, that even our policymakers and politicians understand that health issues are a developmental issue, and it should form a core component of their manifestos going forward.
I wish they could make as much noise as they do, in their about diseases, as they do in their political
almost
rallies. 300
billion annually we spend on NCDs, which are preventable. Most NCDs are preventable. In fact, don't get me onto it, diabetes, which is a third leading, and blood pressure, even cancers, can actually be stopped in their tracks and can be reversed. Some early stages of diabetes type 2 can actually be reversed with diet and exercise 100%. This is information that the audience needs. You don't say, oh, now I've got diabetes, I'm going to die. No, you're not going to die. You can live a full, healthy quality of life your entire life up to 100 years if you change your lifestyle significantly. What you eat, how you exercise, how you live, how you think, and the few who proceed to complicated cases that require treatment and insulin, they can still live a good quality of life. So there is hope. This burden of increasing NCDs is not something that is out of our control. So I'll just pause there and say, let's continue chatting, let's continue interfacing. The details we can't go to because of time limitation. But we are here, this is what we do. We are health and wellness advocates. And we would like to really thank you for these opportunities that you give us to share. Yes.
Okay. Now, Dr. Karekezi, your comment on mental health and a call to action as far as NCDs are concerned.
I think, as Dr. Mukai has said, mental health is a key challenge that we face. There are the mental health disorders per se, the depression and all those schizophrenia and all the different conditions in their own right as NCDs. But we also need to remember that every non-communicable disease comes with a mental health component. Any life-threatening condition that you have will have a mental health component. So you may find, like, if I'm diagnosed with diabetes today, I'll go through a phase of depression. And during that period when I'm depressed or when I'm having challenges accepting my diagnosis, it means I'm not likely to be well controlled. So the longer I stay in that phase, the more likely I'm likely to have diabetes which is out of control, or have cancer which I cannot control. So we also need to remember that there is a mental health component with each NCD.
Correct.
Anything which is going to impact on your life is going to impact on your mental health. What was the other question?
A call to action.
Sorry. Call to action.
Yeah.
I just need to say that NCDs, as Dr. Mokai has said, non-communicable diseases are not a health issue. They extend beyond the area of health, and the government has recognized this. It's issues of trade and industry, which is where you talk about alcohol, tobacco, and healthy foods, and all the rest of it, where the government is generating revenue through the taxes. But they also, as we mentioned, need to look at what is the impact of these commodities on the health of the citizens. So NCDs extend beyond the area of health. Agriculture, the issues of the food that is available. We are preaching, we continue telling people eat healthy. But the food that is there, is it healthy? Is it safe? It may be nutritious, but as Dr. Mokai has told us, and there have been studies which have been shown, things like aflatoxin in milk, pesticide residues in vegetables, in tomatoes, skuma wiki, which is a daily ingredient for the majority of our populations. At the moment, we're using European residue level standards. But those do not take into account the fact that I'm eating skuma wiki on a daily basis. So the cumulative factor. So it may be within the limits of those residue levels, but how frequently am I eating it and in what quantities? So there's the issue of agriculture, environment. Air pollution has now been recognized as the biggest risk factor for NCDs. Both outdoor air pollution, indoor air pollution, especially, and when you talk about the chronic respiratory conditions, indoor air pollution is a key factor. The fuels that we're using in our homes, a lot of, especially in the informal sectors, a lot of them are using charcoal, even if it's kerosene, but how well ventilated are our homes? So you end up breathing in these fumes. Even just from the traffic, how well do we regulate the emissions that are being produced by the vehicles, by the factories, everything. And with air pollution, you can't box the air.
True.
Industrial area, yes, we may talk about the leafy suburbs of Nairobi, in Karen and wherever, but the air is still going to shift there. And as I know, we had a discussion with some people from the informal sector, they said, yeah, as we know, the air here is polluted, it is dangerous, it is toxic. You guys living in the leafy suburb, you think you're breathing in clean air? But it's the same air. Fine, it is being diluted, but... So environment, agriculture, built environment, the roads. Do we have places where people can walk safely? Are we competing with boda-bodas, matatus on pavements which have been built for pedestrians? School children really have a big risk, especially, walking to school. We are all saying that, yes, we need to engage in physical activity. But are there places where people can do this physical activity? Even schools now don't have space for playgrounds. We find that all the space which estates had reserved for recreation facilities have been built up. So where are people supposed to be physically active? Security. We're talking about being physically active, And here we talk about being physically active, not going to the gym, just walking. And, you know, things that you can do for yourself. You don't have to pay for it. But how safe are you walking outside in some areas? Or how safe are children walking to and from school? You know, things like that. So there's issues of security, issues of education. We're talking about creating awareness. How can we get, I know NCDs are now included in the CBC curriculum, but we need to expand. So we really need to create awareness. Ministry of Education, Ministry of Information, to get the information out there. So essentially, NCDs are beyond the sector of health. Absolutely. In fact, health is actually dealing, in a sense, I know one of our colleagues said, with the failures of all the other ministries or sectors.
True.
And in that regard, we need to commend the government. They have now set up an NCD interagency coordinating committee, which is now trying to bring on board all the other sectors which have an influence on health, agriculture, education, environment, and so on. And this is something which is specifically looking at the area of NCDs to try and help them or get them to understand what is their role in NCD prevention and control. So, and then again, maybe just to finish off, I think my call to action, as Dr. Motakaya has said, NCDs are not a death sentence. As we have said, you can be taught and you can learn how to manage for yourself. And maybe one of the other key areas which is also neglected where NCDs are concerned, the issues of palliative care. Palliative care is not end-of-life care. Palliative care is enhancing the quality of your life as you live with your NCD for however many years that God has given you. So you can actually be taught and assisted to better manage that condition. Issues of counseling, issues of wound management, issues of pain management. If you get to the point where you require pain therapy, for example, in stages of cancer. So we have access to pain medication. It's all about improving the quality of life for somebody living with a life-threatening or life-limiting condition. It is not end-of-life care. And I think that's a message I'd like to send out, that NCDs do not have to be a death sentence. You do have opportunity, or you should have opportunity, and you should demand opportunity to be educated about the condition that you have and how you can manage that condition for yourself, understand the medicines that you're taking, understand the kinds of food or the diet, if there are dietary requirements that you need to follow. Again, be physically active as much as you can within the limitations of your condition. Things like if you smoke, stop smoking. That is, there are no two ways about it. Alcohol, restrict the amount of alcohol that you're taking. Let us advocate to the government to look at aspects of air pollution, because that in a sense is a bit beyond the individual. But, and I know because of economics, we are restricted in the kinds of fuels that we can use in our homes, but how can we try and ventilate the homes that we live in so that you're not actually breathing in these toxic fumes that are being produced by the fuels that we use to heat and to cook in our homes. So there are small things that we can do.
All right.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, Dr. Ari, thank you. Thank you so much for those great insights in terms of non-communicable diseases. And dear viewer, that was Dr. Catherine Karekezi, the Executive Director, NCDAC, that is a Non-Communicable Diseases Alliance Kenya, and Dr. Peter Mukaya, a public health physician. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you for your comments, and thank you for the questions for those that found the time to ask. My name is Ida Munzati. We'll still be coming in, as mentioned earlier. Today is Health Monday, so we are still discussing matters health. As Dr. Mukaya mentioned, health is quite an important aspect of our life as a human being. So we will be discussing health. Today I was just joking with a friend of mine or friends of mine and telling them that by the end of today, Dr. Karekezi, maybe I'll be Dr. Ida because of the many shows that I'll be doing on matters health. But the bottom line is, to improve our health and well-being as human beings. So we were looking at non-communicable diseases in Kenya, or the burden of non-communicable diseases in Kenya. We've looked at the types, the risk factors, and of course, as the experts have mentioned, we have the modifiable risk factors which lie within our hands. Thank you so much for tuning in. We take a very short break. We will still be coming back with other health matters. This time we will be discussing on respiratory diseases. Keep sending in your questions and comments through our SMS and WhatsApp number, that is 0111220044. My name is Ida Munzati. Your health always matters.